I'm delighted today to introduce to you our featured speaker for this 80th graduation ceremony here at USC. Dr. Slimen Saliba is a son of the Trinidad soil. I think you would have given a round of applause for that. He grew up in Port of Spain, attended Queen's Royal College, where he completed both his O-levels and advanced levels. After working in his father's retail business for a few years, Saliba entered the theology program at Caribbean Union College, now known as the University of the Southern Caribbean. He graduated as a theology major in 1965 and subsequently completed his bachelor's and master's degrees in theology at Andrews University, Berrien Springs, Michigan in 1969. Returning home in 1970 with his first wife, the former Patricia Thompson, now deceased, he served as the youth director of the South Caribbean Conference and then as the executive secretary. During this time, he was ordained as a minister of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It was also during this time that he had such a very significant impact on my life as a teenager out there in Tobago. And I remember on one occasion when we were camping out there in Charlottesville, Tobago, and I, as an adult teenager, was being given so much responsibility, and I felt it was a little unfair of him to be asking me to do so many things. So I did confront him and ask, when there are so many of us here, why are you just picking on me to do so much? And he remarked, I see that you are influencing the young men very well. That's the reason why I can say today, Dr. Saliba, thanks for helping me to understand that leadership is all about influence, and today I introduce you as chairman of the board. In 1976, Saliba began graduate work in management and marketing, and subsequently completed his PhD in marketing management at Northwestern University. He served as Dean of the School of Business at Andrews University from 1987 to 1993. During this time, he established executive management programs in Hong Kong, Singapore, and in Trinidad. Under his leadership, the Andrews University School of Business also developed affiliations with institutions in Africa, Great Britain, Mexico, and Trinidad. Since 1993, Dr. Saliba has been employed by Florida Hospital, the largest Protestant hospital in the United States. It is a 22-hospital system owned and operated by Adventist Health System. At present, he serves as Senior Vice President and the Chief Marketing Officer of the entire system. Saliba is the father of 3 adult children, Nabi, William, and Yvette, and 2 grandchildren, Sam and Alana. He is currently married to Carolyn Fagel-Kales and resides in Orlando, Florida. Please, let's recognize Mrs. Saliba. Could you please stand and be applauded, please? A very lovely lady. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's please welcome, with a round of applause, our own son of the soil, Dr. Slimen Saliba.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Dr. Tobias, Chairman of the Board, and Mrs. Tobias, Dr. Valley, President of the University, and Mrs. Valley, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives from Judiciary, representatives from the University Board of Directors, representatives from other tertiary institutions, Professor Sankat, faculty, staff, and alumni, graduates, significant others, spouses, family members, members of the media, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, that was a list. It is a distinct honor for me to be your commencement speaker this morning. I deem it a privilege. Talking about invitation, so thank you for the invitation. Talking about invitations, just recently I was invited to join cooking host Paula Dean on her Orlando TV show. She's a national cooking host, and I just know to boil eggs. I say invited, but let me tell you how it really went down. My media colleague came to me and said, "Si, Paula Dean is coming to Orlando to do a big media event with Florida Hospital on healthy living. She would like someone from Florida Hospital to be with her on the TV show, which would be part of the event. Since you are the Chief Marketing Officer and the architect of this Florida Hospital Healthy 100 campaign, you should do it." There's just one little hiccup, however. "Okay," I said, waiting to hear what the hiccup was. "Her handlers want to see a videotape of you being interviewed." "Why?" I asked. Silence and an awkward pause. "Hello," I said, "why?" Hesitatingly, she answers, "They want to make sure that you are not too flashy, not too charismatic, and not too telegenic." And that's how I got invited. I passed their test. So when President Valley invited me to be your commencement speaker, Elder Map, take note. I said to myself, if he asks me for a video, I am going to give him a good piece of my mind. He did not. And for a brief moment, I said to myself, you did all right. You are home free. And then I realized he didn't need a video. He has known me for more than 30 years. So I guess I passed his test too. Here I am today. As I experienced the events of this weekend, Friday night's consecration, Saturday morning's baccalaureate service, I couldn't resist the flashbacks to 1965, when I, like you today, sat in my graduation robes. Like you, we sat in a temporary edifice. Yours is a fancy, air-conditioned, tented structure. However warm you think it is, it's air-conditioned. Trust me. Ours was a huge bamboo edifice built on the slab that was conditioned by the elements of nature. We called it bamboo lawn. Friday night, you were given the imperative, let this mind be in you. Sabbath morning, you were encouraged to tackle the giants you will face. Today, I simply want to challenge you with the question, what will your story be? When you come to the end of the road, what will your story be? What will your story be? When it's all said and done, and the postscript is written on your life lived on this planet, what will your story be? You see, every one of us is an author writing a personal story in acts, behaviors, and relationships. The story of our lives. What was your story is interesting. What is your story is intriguing. What will your story be, as Paul Harvey used to say, and now for the rest of the story. What will it be? That is the question. When we ask the question, what will your story be? We are really asking, what will be the defining events of your life? Those events that will define your story. Think of Moses and think of the defining events of his life. A woven basket in the Nile, killing the Egyptian, the burning bush, confronting Pharaoh, Sinai, seeing but not entering the promised land. The defining events of his life. Think of Peter, walking on water, denying Christ. Lord, you know I love you, feed my sheep. And standing before the crowds at Pentecost saying we ought to obey God rather than men. Think of Paul to King Agrippa. I was not disobedient to that heavenly vision. I could rehearse many more of those biblical lives for you. You can do it just as well. The defining moments of their lives. Think of Churchill. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields. We shall fight in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Defining moments of his life. Think of Martin Luther King. I have a dream. Let freedom ring. Free at last. Free at last. So I ask you, what will your story be? What story will you write? How will you organize the defining events of your life? We know that stuff happens. I know we don't control all the events that impact our daily living. However, what we control is what we do with the events that happen in our lives. How we respond is what we control. How we compose the story is up to us. This morning I want to share with you 3 rules for building and developing and writing your story. Rule number 1, cultivate the moments. Rule number 2, play the hand you have. Rule number 3, commit to a cause. In the time we have remaining, let's unpack these quickly. Cultivate the moments. Last October, I was in France, in the area of southern France known as Provence. And we slept in a little walled city by the name of Carcassonne. And in the morning, we got up and we were walking in the walls of that ancient city, looking at the little shops, taking pictures with my camera. And we suddenly came upon a church built in the walled city. We stepped into a side door as rude American tourists, camera around my neck, bag, and as we walked in, there were 4 young men singing a cappella at the altar. And in that moment, my experience was transformed. It was a moment when all of a sudden I found myself worshiping, quietly put the camera down, and just listen to the melody coming from those 4 young men, echoing through the chambers of the small church, and my spirit was just lifted up to heaven. The moment I'm talking about, when I say seize the moment, is not managed by time. It's managed by transforming experiences. It is measured by the strength of a transforming experience. In that split second, I found myself converted from just being a noisy tourist to a worshiping Christian. In that split moment. So I'm talking about experiences that you must seize and cultivate, that lift your spirit and soul out of this valley of the shadow, above the cut and thrust of daily living. Experiences that take you into His presence, where your soul is watered and fed. Cultivate those moments, those spiritual experiences that feed your spirit and your soul. I'm talking about experiences like the one those 2 disciples had on the road to Emmaus, when they said on reflection, "Did not our hearts burn within us. Cultivate the moments. Cultivate the moments that nourish faith, strengthen resolve, inspire hope and confidence, that calm fears, that give wisdom, especially the moments that give wisdom. Cultivate the moments that generate both zeal and wisdom. We live in a world today that is divided and fractured. People are locked into narrow convictions of right and wrong. It is disconcerting that from the Taliban to the Tea Party, religious zeal is the common driving force. Religious zeal without wisdom. There's a story of two young boys that were very mischievous, and their parents were at their wits' end, not knowing what to do with these two young boys. And finally, in desperation, the mother of the boys went to see the local priest. And she said to him, "Sir, I don't know what to do with these boys. I'm at my wits' end. If they were not my children, I would have put them out of the house." And he said, "Send the younger one to me." And so, on the appointed day, the younger one arrived, and the priest was sitting at his desk, and he had the young boy sit on the other side of the desk, and he just looked at him in stony silence for what felt like an eternity to the young boy, and then he said to him, "Where is God?" And the young boy sat down there bewildered, and finally, after a little while of awkward silence, the priest looked at him again and he said, "I said, young man, where is God?" And he didn't know what to do. And then finally the priest stood up and put his hands on the table and pressed and looked down at him and said, "I said, where is God?" And at that point, the young man just got up, bolt upright from the desk, and ran straight out of the office, went home. Later on, when his elder brother came, he found him hiding in the clothes closet. He said, "What's the problem?" He said, "We have a problem." So the older brother said, "Well, what is the problem?" And the younger one said, "God is missing, and they think we have something to do with it." The sad truth is, we really have something to do with a missing God today. Everyone is locked in narrow mindsets, convinced that they don't need to claim the promise. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of me. We have a lot of religious zeal and very little wisdom. So I say to you today, graduates, cultivate the moments. In writing your story, cultivate the moments. My second rule, play the hand that you have. It's a story that I picked up on the internet. Let me tell you about it. Isaac Perlman, a famous violinist, was affected by childhood polio and could only walk with braces on both legs and crutches. When Perlman plays at a concert, the journey from the wings to the center of the stage is long and slow. When he plays, however, his talent transcends any thought of physical challenge. Perlman was scheduled to play a difficult, challenging violin concerto. In the middle of the performance, one of the strings on his violin snapped like a rifle popping noise that filled the entire auditorium. The orchestra immediately stopped playing, and the audience held its collective breath. They didn't know what Perlman was going to do. After a brief pause, Perlman set his violin under his chin and signaled to the conductor to begin. One person in the audience reported what happened. I know it is impossible to play a violin concerto with only 3 strings. I know that, and so do you. But that night, Isaac Perlman refused to know it. You could see him modulating, changing, recomposing in his head. At one point, it sounded as if he were retuning the strings to get a new sound that had never been heard before. When he finished, there was an awesome silence that filled the room. Then people rose and cheered. Perlman smiled wiped his brow, and raised the bow of his violin to quiet them. He spoke not boastfully, but quietly in a pensive tone. You know, sometimes, he said, it is the artist's task to find out how much music you can still make with what you have left. So I say to you, play the hand that you have. Now, literature says the story might be apocryphal, and they gave a long explanation. You could find it on the internet, why it may not be true and just pure apocryphy. I will tell you that the moral is absolutely true. I, last week, talked to a woman in Orlando, visited her, who runs an organization called Lighthouse. Lighthouse, Central Florida. Her name, Lee Nasihi. She's the mother of a child who was born 1 pound and 14 ounces, blind, with cerebral palsy, and a brain bleed that compromised his ability to think and act. She joined Lighthouse, Central Florida, and is now the leader of an organization that trains blind people, more than 1,000, to live, to learn, and to earn. And she introduced me to some of those blind people working in the call center, packaging medical supplies for the US military, and she was managing her own 30-year-old son as well. Play the hand that you have. That's what she was doing. She heads up the organization. I saw them. I talked to them. I watched them work. I listened to their stories, and one particular woman, Nicole Gray, who went blind in her later years in life, coming to terms with her blindness and learning to bowl with other blind friends and knock the pins down. She was playing the hand that she had. They were writing their stories, playing the hand that they have. So as you develop your story, cultivate the moments, play the hand you have, and finally, the third one, commit to a cause. I pulled out of the CNN News, Mayor Bloomberg. You may have heard of him, New York. He was a young child raised in a middle-class Boston suburb. Michael Bloomberg took out loans to pay his tuition at Johns Hopkins University and worked as a parking lot attendant. Bloomberg's first gift to his alma mater was a whopping $5 in 1965, a year after he graduated with a bachelor's degree in engineering. His first gift, $5. Fast forward to Saturday, January 26, 2013, when the Baltimore University announced Bloomberg has now given a total of $1.1 billion. Not million, billion. The latest commitment came in the form of a cool $350 million to what a transformational initiative aimed at cross-discipline solutions to societal problems. Bloomberg said he was a mediocre student in high school that had someone whom he worked for say, you should go to Johns Hopkins, that's where I went, and you should go to that school. And he finally ended up by saying, let's be serious. I was a B and a C student. They took a chance on me. And because they took a chance on him, he has become committed to that cause. I was reading the papers just about a week after that and read about the Lakers and a chap by the name of Kobe Bryant. And this is what Kobe Bryant said in the papers about the manager of the Lakers who subsequently died. He was in hospital with cancer, and Bryant said of him, he meant everything to me. Veteran Lakers guard Kobe Bryant said of Buss, he took a chance on a 17-year-old kid coming out of Philadelphia. Nobody really saw that potential, and he's believed in me the entire way. Commit to a cause. He took a chance on that 70-year-old. When I'm talking about commit to a cause, I'm talking about the ability to understand and empathize with other humans whose experiences we have never shared. Commit to a cause that touches other people's lives. It was 1966, 1 year after I graduated from Caribbean Union College. It was the summer of 1966. I had spent the year from 65 to 66 at Andrews as a junior. And now I was in Ontario, Canada, canvassing, raising funds to go back to school in the fall. The publishing secretary came out with me to show me how it should be done. He spent Monday with me canvassing the farmers from door to door. We sold nothing. At the end of the day, he said, well, I have to move on. I showed you how to do it. Good luck. I canvassed all day Tuesday without success. And of course, I was very concerned. What's going to happen to me? If this is the way canvassing will go, what will happen at the end of the summer? On Wednesday morning, I remember very distinctly, I was driving down one of those dusty concession roads, and I saw this gate that was closed. And one voice said, pass it. And the other voice said, stop and go in. You should call on every house. So I finally settled the argument by stopping, opened the gate, drove my car in, stopped, closed the gate because you didn't want to allow anybody's cow or horse to get out in the road. Drove a little ways, I couldn't see the house. I came to another gate and the voice again said, stop, too many gates, turn back. I silenced the voice, opened the gate, drove the car, closed the gate, finally drove up to the house. As I was driving up to the house with my bag, I was looking for little signs, you know, a little bicycle, a tricycle, baby clothes hanging on the line to know what to sell them. Knocked on the door, and an elderly lady came out and looked at me quizzically in her eyes. My canvas was a simple one. Good morning. Could I have a glass of water, please? That usually got me in. So she opened the door and let me in. I drank a lot of water in those days. And sitting down in front of me was an elderly gentleman, probably in his 80s, steadying his shaking hands on a cane. And they both looked at me as I drank the water, waiting to hear, well, what am I here for? And I couldn't figure out what to canvass them with, so I reached in the bag, and the first book that came out was Modern Ways to Health. I don't think they have that anymore. They have You and Your Health now. So I opened the book, and the first section it opened on was Diseases of Childhood for these 80-year-olds. So I started to talk about measles and whooping cough, and they were just looking at me. And finally, the old man said to me, why are you doing this? And I said to him, sir, I'm selling these books to put myself through school. That wasn't supposed to be the canvas, but I was desperate. And he turned to his wife. He said, how much is it? And I said it was like $29.50. He said to the wife, buy it from him. That was my first sale. I went on to make enough during the summer to go back to school. But that first sale affirmed me. He took a chance on me, and it helped me to gain the confidence to go on. Years later, I was coming out of the high-low in Valsade, a wife on my arm, 2 bags of groceries under each arm, and as I stepped outside, there was a young girl standing there, bedraggled looking, with a long dress and a little child holding on to the side of her dress. In her hands were some blackened bananas, and she said, sir, buy them from me. I remembered the old man. And I turned to my wife and I said, honey, buy the bananas from her. And she looked at me and she said, those bananas? I said to her, don't argue with me. Just give her the money. Don't ask her for change, and take the bananas. I have to tell you, that was 47 years ago. I don't remember who spoke at my graduation, and I doubt you will. I don't remember what the speaker said, but I remember that old man and his wife. I remember what they did for me. It is as fresh in my memory as if it were yesterday. And I will remember it until the last day of my life. I am his debtor for the rest of my life. Over almost 50 years, I have seen that look in his eyes countless times, and I have gladly paid that debt over and over again. I say to you this morning, commit to a cause. Take a chance on someone. Is it any wonder that on that day, the defining word will be from the Master, inasmuch? Not what church did you belong to, not which day did you worship on, not did you eat meat or did you wear a wedding ring, but inasmuch. Inasmuch. Inasmuch as you committed to a cause, to feed the hungry, to visit the poor in jail, to clothe the naked, inasmuch. So I say to you, as you write your story, commit to a cause. Graduates, I ask you this morning, what will your story be? 3 suggested rules for writing. Cultivate the moment. Play the hand you have. Commit to a cause. And I'll translate that last one for you in local idiom. Put your money where your mouth is. You may have heard the story, but it bears repeating. The wise man confronted by the 2 boys who said to him, to challenge his wisdom, I have a bird in my hand. Is it alive or is it dead? And their thinking was, if he says alive, they would quickly break the neck. And if he said it was dead, they would present him with the live bird. Looking at the 2 young men, he said to them, the answer is in your hands. I say to you, what will your story be? The answer is in your hands.